So today I'm back with a video that I feel is long overdue, but I don't know if anyone else has actually been missing this series. So this is kind of just a for me video, but hey, whatever. I have another Fazbear Frights review today. I finally broke into a book 4, Step Closer, and read the first short story in it, which is also called Step Closer. So, as I kind of have noticed with others of the Fazbear Frights, especially as the sort of series of them has progressed, the writing was really nice in this one. I think it's a different co-writer with Scott Cawthon than some of the other ones have been, but it was really good in that sense, and I really enjoyed, like, the pacing of the story was pretty good, the tension of the story was pretty solid overall. There are technically a few changes that I feel like could have still improved the story, because that's what I do a lot of the time too. It's like, oh, this was not a bad way to do it, but what if you'd done it this way? Or, oh, this is a good scene, I wonder if they'll go this way, and then they don't. So there was some of that in this story for me. So it wasn't like a top tier Fazbear Frights story for me, but it was a solid one. So the general premise of this one is that we have two brothers, Pete and Chuck. Pete is the older brother and Chuck is his younger brother. Their parents were just recently divorced, and they have some adventures with Foxy, the animatronic. And it themed really interestingly in that there's kind of this attack from Foxy at the very beginning where he's like, you can become a pirate, but you'll have to lose an eye and an arm. And then that's kind of the theme of the events that happen in the story, is that there's all these freak accidents that keep happening where Pete is the one who's being, like, attacked, basically, and he has all these freak accidents where he almost loses an eye or he almost loses an arm/hand, and they were done very well. However, this draws to the first point that I wanted to make about what I was saying about how I would have changed the plotting a little bit, is that the very opening scene is we get Foxy talking to Pete, telling him you'll have to lose an eye and an arm to become a pirate, and then we get this scene of Foxy actually, like, taking out Pete's eye, ripping off his arm, all of that, and, like, that's a really good setup and would have been really interesting to see how the story progressed from there. But I think it's more like a future event / dream kind of sequence instead, and so then he's just got kind of mundane life where weird accidents happen where he almost loses his eye and almost loses his hand after encountering Foxy in a pizzeria and stuff. And so, yes, well done to go through those sequences and be like, oh, is this the time that he's actually going to lose these things and stuff? But at the same time, it was like, but if we'd gone from there at the beginning where he actually really had lost it, especially since we've got his younger brother Chuck, who does have, like, perspective scenes and stuff in the story, it just would have been interesting to see, like, how Chuck reacted to it, particularly with the way the ending ultimately goes. It would have been interesting to see, like, Chuck's reaction to maybe if, like, Foxy ended up having one eye that looked like Pete's eye or something, and then Chuck trying to figure out how to deal and cope with all of that, and, you know, something like that would have been a really interesting take on it, I feel like. I did think this was fun in that we did have the two perspectives. As far as I recall, I don't think any of the other Fazbear Frights have had two perspectives, so that was kind of a fun difference to this one, I felt like. I do think it's really interesting that there were kind of two things, too, that I noticed in this that I feel like are kind of themes within the Fazbear Frights. The first being that this is basically another story where there's, like, a single parent, since their parents were just divorced. The dad is mentioned, but the mom is the one that's mostly featured. And a lot of the other Fazbear Frights with kids have had either, like, divorced or single parents, too. And so I just wonder if maybe that's something from, like, Scott Cawthon's own life that he uses, or if it just is, like, a good trauma to put into a story that he feels like gives them good motivation to be like, this is why I'm kind of a jerky kid, and that kind of a thing. So I'd be curious if anyone knows anything about that. But that was just kind of some of my own surmising. And then also, within this one, Pete has kind of been bullying Chuck because it's sort of an older to younger sibling dynamic, and also just because Pete is so frustrated with his life situation now that his parents are divorced and stuff. And again, like several of the other Fazbear Fright stories, it's really interesting because he kind of learns how to move on and progress past that, but then he's still like ultimately punished for his actions. And I don't know if that's just like a general horror trope, or if that's like a Scott Cawthon thing that's like, well, you still need your just desserts even though you're trying to be better kind of thing. I don't know. It's very interesting. And yeah, just ultimately kind of sad. I feel bad that they actually do kind of learn a lesson, but then they're still kind of punished for it. And so yeah, there's a thought. And then just one final thing that I do want to talk about, since it is spoilers. I'm leaving it towards the end, so you can just hop off if you don't want to hear any spoilery stuff, especially since this is the very ending of the story that I want to talk about. But at the very end of the story, Pete gets into an accident that really does, like, end things for him. You think he's just gone. It talks about things from Chuck's perspective after the accident, and it's like he's dead now, all of that, and it's really sad. But it also gives you a scene of Pete in the morgue, and he gets a final, like, perspective scene where he's, like, in the morgue and doesn't realize he's dead, and the people are talking over him about him being dead, saying they can't, like, close his eyes and think so he can, like, still see out. And it's almost like that situation that you sometimes hear about that, I mean, I think it's really rare, but where people can be under the anesthetic but still be aware that they're, like, having surgery or something. It gave me kind of that sense, and that feel except for that he's technically dead. And then they're, like, talking about donating his organs and stuff, because earlier in the story his mom had made the family organ donors so that they could help people should anything ever happen, that kind of thing, which I don't know if that's technically legal that you can do before there's, like, the medical situation that's like, yeah, I choose to let my child, like, organs be donated. I don't know if that happens before the medical situation, if that's a thing, or if it would only be like, oh, you got in a car accident, you're gonna die anyways, but we can offer these organs. I don't know. But there was that aspect of it, so they're, like, getting ready to cut him up to, like, donate his organs. Specifically, they reference an eye and a hand for a kid, and I was like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting then if, like, we had started, like, with a dreamy-ish sequence that the story did start with, and then we come to him being in this situation in the morgue where he's, like, aware of what's going on, and then his body parts get taken away for that, and then we cut to Chuck after the fact, and he finds this other kid who he's like, he seems strangely familiar somehow, and then he realizes that he's got, like, Pete's eyes in his hand or something. That would have been a really interesting story too. Oh. Would have been so interesting. Anyways, that's my writer brain being like, why couldn't that have been the story? That would have been an interesting story. Not that the story we got wasn't interesting, but just it would have been another interesting perspective and direction you could have taken it. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down below if you happen to have read Step Closer, if it's one that you really like from the Fazbear Frights, if you have one that you like more. Obviously, I still have a few more to read, 2 more within the Step Closer book, and then there's the 5th book that I don't remember the name of that also has 3 stories in it that I'll get to eventually as well. But yeah, let me know your thoughts of the Fazbear Frights and all that fun stuff down below. This is the Imla Harper, signing out.